The gavel came down hard. Cook County Federal Courthouse, Chicago. A room full of people holding their breath. Judge Naomi Tolliver looked down at the man in front of her, and she felt nothing but certainty. 10 years in federal custody. Gasps, murmurs. The prosecutor exhaled. And Sang-Wook Son didn't blink. He just stood there, shackled, sleeveless black shirt, built like someone who'd survived things most people only see in nightmares. He looked at her the way you look at weather, like she was just something happening to him. She'd seen that look before. Arrogance wearing a calm mask. She wasn't moved. See, Naomi Tolliver didn't get to that bench by being soft. South Side Chicago, father shot dead in gang crossfire when she was 12. She clawed her way through every room that tried to close the door on her. First black female federal judge in her district. They called her the Hammer, and she wore it like a crown. She had no mercy for men like this. No mercy. She straightened her robe, reached for her pen, and that's when the marshal shifted his chains. Just slightly, just enough. The sleeve moved, and she saw it. Her pen stopped. Her eyes locked onto his arm, that tattoo. She'd assumed it was gang ink, syndicate markings, the kind she'd seen on a dozen men she'd already sent away. But this was different. She leaned forward, just barely, and her breath caught somewhere in her chest. Her hand, slowly, came up to cover her mouth. The court reporter looked up. The prosecutor frowned. Nobody else in that room understood what she was seeing, but she did. And in that single moment, every assumption she'd built this case on started to crack. Stay with me, because what that tattoo meant will change everything you think you know about this story. And if you are here for the first time, click that subscribe button, like this video, and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more wonderful stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, before that gavel came down, let's back up just a little, because what happened before the sentencing, that's where this story really starts to get interesting. Naomi Tolliver had been waiting for this moment for 2 years. 2 years of surveillance reports, wiretaps, witness testimonies, sealed federal indictments. She had him, clean, tight, no gaps, and she wanted him to know it. She leaned forward, looked Sang-Wook Son dead in his eyes, and she said it slow. You built your empire on fear. Pause. Today, fear answers to me. Oh, the gallery loved that. Murmurs rippled through the room. One of the prosecutors? Yeah, he smirked, like, that's our girl. And Sang-Wook? Nothing. No flinch, no shift, no reaction whatsoever. Just those calm, unreadable eyes looking back at her like she'd just told him the weather forecast. That actually annoyed her a little. Not that she'd ever show it. She kept going, called his operation street-level thuggery dressed in designer suits. A few people in the gallery actually laughed. Nervous laughs, the kind you do when the judge is clearly in her bag and you don't want to miss a second of it. And still, he said nothing. Until he did. Quiet, no dramatics, just 3 words, delivered like he was stating a simple fact. You're wrong about me. Pause. Your Honor. She blinked, just once. And then she dismissed it, waved it off mentally like, yeah, they all say that. Every man she'd ever sentenced thought he was the exception, thought his story was different. She had 0 interest. She reached for her papers, and that's when the marshal stepped forward to adjust the chains. Just routine, just a small shift. But his sleeve moved, and the tattoo on his arm came into full view. She stopped talking mid-sentence. Not Yakuza ink, not triad symbols, not anything she'd seen in 2 years of case files. That was a U.S. Army Ranger insignia, customized, worn, like it meant something deeply personal. The court reporter's fingers paused above the keys, and Judge Naomi Tolliver, the hammer, just stared, because now she had a question she couldn't answer. Why would a Chicago crime boss be wearing the mark of a decorated American soldier? She didn't sign the final paperwork that night, which, for Naomi Tolliver, was basically unheard of. This woman color-coded her calendar. She had a system for her systems. Delaying paperwork wasn't in her DNA. But she sat in her chambers, alone, long after everyone else had gone home. Just her, the desk lamp, and that image she couldn't shake, that tattoo. She pulled up every database she had access to, ran his name through federal records. Criminal history? Yeah, it was there. Racketeering, money laundering, weapons charges, all of it documented and clean. But something kept nagging at her. Something felt off. So she did something she hadn't done in years. She picked up her phone and called a contact she had buried deep in Pentagon legal affairs. Old friend, the kind you only call when you need something that isn't supposed to be easy to find. She said 3 words, Sang-wook-san, Chicago. And then she waited. The callback came 40 minutes later, and what her contact read back to her, she had to ask him to repeat it, twice. Sergeant First Class Sang-wook-san, 2 combat tours, Afghanistan, Silver Star, Purple Heart. She sat back in her chair slowly, like the air had just been let out of the room. Silver Star. That's not a participation trophy. That is awarded for valor in the face of enemy fire, the kind of thing you earn by doing something most people would never survive. And a Purple Heart means he was wounded in service, meaning this man bled for this country. Her contact kept going, discharged under sealed circumstances. Sealed, as in someone somewhere decided that whatever happened at the end of his military career wasn't for the public to know. She stared at the wall for a long moment, and then, like a slow rewind in her head, she heard his voice again. Quiet, calm, almost throwaway, the way he'd said it early in the proceedings, when she'd barely registered it. I used to serve this country. She'd clocked it as manipulation, classic defendant move, throw something sympathetic into the record, see if it lands. She'd heard every version of that play. But now she wasn't so sure. Because there's a difference between a man who says he served and a man whose sealed military file says he bled in a desert on the other side of the world and came home with medals most people never earn. She looked at his photo in the case file. Same calm face, same unreadable eyes, same man she'd sentenced just hours ago. And for the first time in a very long time, Judge Naomi Tolliver felt something she did not appreciate feeling: doubt. Because here's the question that was now keeping her up at night. Why would a decorated war hero end up labeled a mob boss? She didn't sleep. Not really. By 2 a.m., she had 3 browsers open, a cold cup of coffee she'd forgotten about, and a growing feeling in her chest that she could not name yet. She went back further, past the criminal case, past the federal indictments. She went looking for the man, and what she found broke something open in her. Chicago Tribune Archives, 2019. Woman shot and killed outside Chinatown Bakery in an apparent hate crime. Her name was Ji-yeon Son, Sung-wook's wife. Shot in broad daylight, outside a bakery she visited every Saturday morning. Her son, Min-ho, 6 years old at the time, was with her. He survived. She didn't. Naomi sat with that for a second. A 6-year-old boy standing outside a bakery, watching his mother. She exhaled slowly, and then It got worse. Case dismissed. Insufficient evidence. Naomi knew exactly what that meant. She'd seen it her whole career. She grew up on the South Side. She knew what insufficient evidence looked like when it was really just insufficient effort. Nobody was held accountable. Nobody. So Sung-wook's son came home from 2 tours in Afghanistan, decorated, wounded, survived things most people can't imagine, and the city he fought for couldn't protect his wife, couldn't even pretend to try. She leaned back and just stared at the ceiling for a moment. Because here's where the story shifts. After the case was dismissed, something quiet started happening in Koreatown. Businesses that had been struggling started thriving. Landlords who had been running predatory schemes backed off. The drug corners? Gone. Violence? Dropped significantly. No gangs moving in, no chaos, just order. Prosecutors looked at that and said, syndicate control, classic organized crime consolidating power. But community members told a completely different story. They said, we finally felt safe. And then Naomi found the body cam footage. 2020 riots, Chicago. Buildings burning, people trapped. There's Sung-wook's son, no badge, no uniform, pulling civilians out of a burning storefront on Michigan Avenue. Not running product, not collecting money, pulling people out of a burning building. She watched it 3 times. And the prosecutors who built this case never submitted this footage, never mentioned it, not once. She closed her laptop slowly, sat in the silence of her chambers, and felt something she hadn't expected to feel about Sung-wook's son. Respect, mixed with something heavier. Pain. Because she understood now, this wasn't a man who chose crime because it was easy. This was a man who came home from war, found his world destroyed, and built something to protect what was left. Was it legal? No. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. But was he a monster? She wasn't so sure anymore. So who exactly did she just sentence to 10 years in federal prison? Now, I need you to stay with me here, because this next part, this is the part that got her. Not the military records, not the body cam footage, not even the dismissed murder case. This. It was the following afternoon. Naomi was at Chicago Children's Hospital. Routine visit, a community event she'd committed to weeks earlier. She almost canceled. She was walking down one of the corridors, mind still somewhere in those case files, when she saw him. A boy. Small, maybe 10 years old, sitting in a chair outside one of the rooms with a security detail nearby, which, okay, that's already unusual for a kid, reading a book so intently he didn't even look up when she walked past. She almost kept walking, but she caught the cover. An introduction to the U.S. Constitution. She stopped, and she looked closer, and her stomach just dropped. She recognized the face. Min-ho's son. Sung-wook's boy. The same child who was standing outside that Chinatown bakery 11 years ago. He was just sitting there, calm, focused, like a little man who'd already seen too much of the world and decided to understand it instead of fear it. A nurse came by and asked them something, small talk, the way nurses do, and Min-ho looked up and said, matter-of-factly, like he'd heard it so many times it had become part of him, "My dad says justice isn't revenge." Small pause. It's protection. The nurse smiled politely and moved on, but Naomi couldn't move, because those words just landed somewhere deep, the kind of deep you can't logic your way out of. Then the boy reached into his bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, drew it open carefully, like it was something precious, showed it to nobody in particular, just held it. It was a drawing. Crayon. Child's handwriting. A man in military uniform, broad shoulders, standing tall. At the bottom, in uneven letters, "My hero." And that was it. That was the moment Naomi Tolliver, the hammer, felt something crack wide open inside her chest. Because she remembered being 10. She remembered the phone call, the front door, her mother's face collapsing. She remembered being a little girl who just wanted someone to protect her father. And nobody did. Nobody came. She built her entire career on that grief, channeled every bit of it into that courtroom, into those gavels, into every sentence she handed down. I am the protection, she always told herself. I am what stands between order and chaos. But standing in that corridor, looking at that drawing, she had to ask herself a question she had never, not once, allowed herself to ask. What if she had just become the very thing she'd spent her whole life fighting against? She made a decision that night. Not a legal one, not yet. A human one. She was going to talk to him. Not as a judge, not with robes and gavels and court reporters typing every word. Just two people in a room having an honest conversation. Which, let me tell you, was already crossing a line most judges wouldn't even look at sideways. Her clerk warned her. Her bailiff gave her that look. She went anyway. County Detention Visitation Room, fluorescent lights that flicker just enough to be annoying, plastic chairs, bulletproof glass. Sang-wook Sol walked in and sat down like he owned the chair. No nervousness, no performance, just stillness. She got straight to it. "I've been looking into your record." He said nothing, just watched her. "The military file, your wife, the community work, all of it." Still nothing. She leaned forward. "Here's what I'm offering. You cooperate, you give us names, corrupt officials, the real architects behind the operations, and I will personally advocate to reduce your sentence. Significantly." She sat back. "This is a good deal." Sang-wook looked at her for a long moment, and then, quietly, "I don't need redemption, Your Honor." Pause. "I need my son safe." And the way he said it, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't a speech, it was just the plainest, most honest thing she'd heard in that courthouse in 20 years. She pressed harder. "You built a criminal network. People were hurt." He didn't flinch. "I built a shield." Just like that. 4 words, calm as still water. A shield. She repeated it almost to herself. She tried a different angle. Told him cooperating was the smart move. Told him Min-ho needed a father present, not a martyr. Told him pride wasn't worth a decade behind bars. He listened to every word, and then he said, "I'm not protecting my pride. I'm protecting the people who'd be exposed if I talked." She stared at him. "Talking gets people killed. I know how this works better than you do." And she couldn't even argue with that, because he wasn't wrong. He wouldn't beg, wouldn't perform remorse he didn't feel, wouldn't trade names to make his own life easier. In a room full of men who'd told her every lie imaginable to shave time off a sentence, this man just sat there and told her the truth. And honestly, that earned him something from her she didn't give easily. Respect. She left that visitation room quieter than she entered it, and on the drive back, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. 3 words. "Let it go." No signature, no context. Just a warning. And suddenly, this wasn't just about one case anymore.
She should have let it go. That's what the smart version of her would have done. Deleted the text, filed the paperwork, gone home, poured a glass of wine, watched something mindless on TV. Let it go. But Naomi Tolliver didn't get to that bench by being smart. She got there by being right. The next morning, she was called in for a private meeting at the Chicago Federal Building. No agenda sent ahead, no formal invite. just a message from the U.S. Attorney's Office that essentially said, "Come in," which in legal circles means we need to talk before you do something we all regret. She walked in. U.S. Attorney Gerald Marsh, expensive suit, practiced smile, the kind of man who'd been powerful so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to be nervous. He didn't waste time. "Naomi," first name, note that. "Don't get sentimental." She smiled, said nothing. He kept going, talked about the integrity of the case, the years of work, the precedent her sentence set, how reopening anything would send the wrong message to organized crime across the city. Very polished, very practiced. And then she asked one question. Who owns the properties that were seized when Song-wook's operation was dismantled? Silence. Just a flicker, barely a second, but she saw it. She went back to her office and spent the next 4 hours pulling property records. And what she found, this was dirty. 3 of the largest seized properties in Koreatown, buildings Song-wook's network had been operating out of, had already been quietly transferred, rezoned, flagged for luxury redevelopment. The buyers? Shell companies. But she kept pulling threads. Those shell companies traced back to political donors, people who had been at Gerald Marsh's fundraiser 8 months ago. They didn't just want Song-wook convicted, they needed him gone. Because as long as he was present, as long as his network held that community together, those properties couldn't be touched. The neighborhood resisted gentrification because it had protection. Remove the shield, and Koreatown was open for business. She sat at her desk for a long time. This was the moment. She knew it. She could protect her career, her legacy, everything she'd spent 30 years building. One woman against a system that had been running this play long before she showed up. Or she could reopen the sentencing hearing, risk impeachment, risk her career, risk becoming the story instead of delivering justice. She picked up her pen, signed the motion. Sentencing hearing reopened. Her clerk's jaw dropped. Her phone started ringing immediately. Marsh's office, twice. She didn't answer. Because some things are bigger than your career. And truth is one of them. And what happened when she walked back into that courtroom stunned everyone in that building. The courtroom was packed. And I mean packed. Standing room only. Press lined up along the walls with cameras. Someone was live streaming from the gallery, which technically wasn't allowed, but honestly, nobody stopped them. Because word had gotten out. Not the details, just the energy. The something is about to happen kind of energy that spreads through a city like a current. Sang-wook was brought in. Same stillness, same unreadable face. Like a man who had decided a long time ago that he would not give the room the satisfaction of seeing him sweat. Naomi walked in last. No nerves on her face either. 2 unbothered people about to change everything. She didn't ease into it. She opened the sealed military file, right there, out loud, in front of everyone. Sergeant First Class Sang-wook's son, Silver Star, Purple Heart, 2 combat tours. Gasps, murmurs rippling like a wave from the back of the room to the front. She kept going. His wife, Ji-yeon, the Chinatown shooting, the dismissed case, the insufficient evidence that somehow never got sufficient despite witnesses and daylight and a 6-year-old boy standing right there. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. She kept going. The property transfers, the shell companies, the political donors, the Koreatown redevelopment scheme that required one decorated veteran to be locked away so that powerful men could carve up his community like it was nothing. By now, the room was barely containing itself. Gerald Marsh, sitting 3 rows back, looked like a man who deeply regretted coming. And through all of it, Sang-wook just sat there, calm, still, like a man who already knew the truth and had simply been waiting for the room to catch up. Then she said it. Clear, no performance, just conviction. Justice without truth is just punishment. The room broke. Community leaders in the gallery stood first, then others, applause rolling through a federal courtroom, which almost never happens, and nobody moved to stop it. She didn't free him completely. She was still a judge, still bound by law. But she vacated the original sentence, reduced it significantly, ordered house arrest pending independent review, and formally requested a federal investigation into the property transfers and the dismissed hate crime case. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was truth. Finally, out loud in front of everyone. And outside on the courthouse steps, a boy came running. Minho, 10 years old, Constitution book probably still in his bag. He ran straight into his father's arms. Sang-wook held him. Didn't say anything, just held him. Chicago skyline stretched out behind them, late afternoon light cutting through the buildings like something cinematic. The city just watched. And for one moment, it felt like something had actually been made right. But the story wasn't over yet. They met on the rooftop. Nobody scheduled it, nobody announced it, just two people who had been circling the same truth from opposite sides, finally standing in the same place. Chicago stretched out below them, sun going down slow, wind catching the edge of her robe like the city itself was exhaling. She spoke first. "I thought I was punishing a monster." He looked out at the skyline. "And I thought you were part of the system that failed us." Neither of them looked away from the city for a moment. Then she said, "You told me fear answers to me." He turned to look at her. She met his eyes. "I was wrong. Truth does." He reached up slowly and removed his jacket. That tattoo, full view now. No chains framing it, no courtroom lighting making it look threatening. Just a man, and his service, and everything it cost him. She looked at it differently this time. Not a gang marking, not a threat, a story. He told her what he wanted, a legitimate security firm, youth outreach in Koreatown, something real, something lasting, built on the right foundation this time. He didn't ask her to fix everything, just to stand beside the truth publicly. She nodded. "I can do that." A helicopter crossed the skyline above them. Wind picked up. And somewhere in that city, a 10-year-old boy was at home, safe, waiting for his father. Sometimes justice isn't about who you sentence, it's about who you're willing to see. If this story moved you at all, don't just let it end here. Because right now, somewhere in this country, there is an innocent person standing in front of a judge, and the only thing standing between them and a decade lost is someone brave enough to look twice. Be that person in your own life. Like this video so the algorithm shows it to someone who needs it. Subscribe if you believe truth should have a voice louder than power. And drop "justice over pride" in the comments if you would have had the courage to reopen that case. Because if you watched this whole story and just scroll away, that's exactly how injustice survives. Don't be the silence.